Tauppa miulle kanteloinen, tauppa se miulle kanteloinen.
The starting point was probably just a gift from the Philharmonia Orchestra to get to do something before or after a concert, something that would tie in nicely with a beginning of a season and the beginning of the Nordic music days. I think it very much came from sort of seeing what the orchestra is doing.
Takopa se miulle kanteloisen, takopa se miulle kanteloisen, oiralluisen kanteloisen, oiralluisen kanteloisen.
Ilona is a continuation of a very, 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 very old tradition. Ilona is kind of the authority on stuff related to Larin Paraske, the singer who sang for Sibelius, and in my opinion, my very humble opinion, sort of transformed Sibelius's language, or sort of gave him some of the tools that he needed to transform his language into what we know and love. That makes Larin Paraske a historically very interesting person.
Nepä veimmä Ruottimaalle, nepä veimmä Ruottimaalle. Viskasin Viron saroille. Runo-song, rune singing, is the oldest finno-baltic singing style. Larin Paraske was the greatest of Isorian, or as we say, Ingrian runo singers. She sang 40,000 rune verses, which has been published by Finnish Literature Society, and it's huge collection of one person's runo material. Runo actually means poem in Finnish, but you can't say that this is poem singing because runo-song means so much more. It's hard for people nowadays because the meter is completely different language actually, and you have to know the meter, how it works in sentences or verses or words, and that's cool.
Very.
Panin orjot kattomaani, oino kykki otrassani. Sinisarvi saaressain, sinisarvi saaressain. Otin oinon toin kotiin, otin oinon toin kotiin. I have been trying to find inside me the same source that she had, how the poem, the runo, came out of her, because she didn't memorize everything by heart, but she also made up the verses all the time. She was able to produce epic stories and things. So, link between Sibelius and Larin Paraske is kind of obvious. And actually they met in Porvoo, quite near here. It was 1891 when it happened. And they met there, and I think it has been a quite extraordinary thing for Sibelius anyway to meet someone who was so near to this tradition and living the tradition. Actually, Sibelius was a researcher of runo-song already and knew about it already before he met Paraske. But I think that has been some kind of turning point for him.
Yeah. In the music, like in the output of Sibelius, it's quite sort of easy to recognize. I've played some of his stuff that are from that came from the late 1880s. There's a wonderful E major suite, but it sort of sounds like someone who doesn't really have very advanced composing tools at his disposal yet, trying to imitate something like Wieniawski, maybe. So sort of very charming, virtuosic, small-scale music. And then something clicks and he seems to connect to much, much further back time in history, and kind of the language gets suddenly transformed into something that is sort of global and eternal, something that can speak to pretty much, I would say, anyone, anywhere, at any time. If I'm not mistaken, Sibelius, when asked about it, did not admit that he would have been influenced by Larin Paraske. Then there's the thing about what happened to his music that sort of says something else. I have my own, like, I think we sort of call it kitchen psychology. When people with very little qualifications or no qualifications try to analyze what has been going on in somebody else's mind. My kitchen psychological diagnosis of Sibelius says that his self-esteem was so catastrophically low that if he would have admitted, well, yes, of course, my tunes came from Larin Paraske or some melodies came from some traditions, he would have felt that people would put less value on his grand effort, that he would have kind of like the same sort of thing that we have now with or we've had already for decades with DJ culture, that there are people who say that a DJ is actually not an artist or a musician because he just uses something from other people. So if Sibelius maybe borrowed a melody here and there, that it would sort of lessen the value of his work. Of course it's not like that, but he might have felt that way, I'm not sure. On a completely personal level, I do feel like when you perform Sibelius's music, symphonies or the concerto, and you have never heard any rune singing or are not aware of the whole tradition existing, it's a little bit like playing music by Brahms and not being aware of Hungarian or Romanian traditional music or kind of so-called gypsy music. That was a very strong influence on Brahms. So there is an entire background of information to be drawn from. It takes it sort of away from the beautiful concert halls with the chandeliers and that stuff, and it puts it somewhere that frankly feels more like a home, because it's still rough music. We can plan, we can design, and we can compose, but I would say maybe 80% of the decisions happening for the performance in London will be made at the performance in London. It's a fantastic moment to kind of handle some music, some poetry, and a tradition that comes from a time and a place where what we are doing now for a living, what we have to do for a living now, would have been completely unimaginable. To grasp that sort of existence in the middle of one of the most hectic cities on the planet, coming from different countries and just kind of being thrown together, and then maybe we can have half an hour, 45 minutes, 1 hour of just sort of real concentration and just focusing on this music that can and will only happen that one time, based on a set of rules that is from hundreds, thousands years ago.
Takopa se minulle kanteloisen, takopa se minulle kanteloisen, oiralloisen kanteloisen, oiralloisen.